Merry Christmas and welcome. Tonight, in honor of the 300th anniversary of the hymn, Joy to the World, we'll reflect together on the words of the hymn and the shape and the value of joy in our lives. Joy is a natural and spontaneous response to the glory of the world, to the beauty we see in one another, and to the miracle of existence. Sometimes joy bubbles up from places deep inside us. Sometimes it breaks in and colors the everyday, the ordinary, with magic and mystery. When we're children, we find joy easily and effortlessly. But as we grow and mature, we have to come to terms with the complexity and the brokenness of the world, and joy sometimes becomes more elusive. Tonight, we'll remember together that it's not that joy has abandoned us, that in every moment, joy waits, ever present, wanting to fill us up, lift us up, light us up. It's just that we sometimes forget, get distracted, or become numb. We choose not to let it in. In a culture that works hard to make us feel anxious, afraid, and unworthy of love, cultivating joy is an act of resistance. Opening our hearts, minds, and spirits to joy once again gives us strength and courage. We're better able to find peace, to maintain our balance, to hear the still, small voice within. So on this Christmas Eve, let us turn together toward joy and commit to practicing and celebrating joy in our own lives and in our community. Our first reading is by my colleague, the Reverend Karen Johnston. She serves in East Brunswick, New Jersey. And she gives us a little rundown on the history of joy to the world. She writes, "This year, we mark the 300th anniversary of what has become the most published hymn in North America, Joy to the World. Written by Isaac Watt, it's an interpretation of the 98th Psalm, Make a Joyful Noise to the Lord, with echoes of Luke and Genesis mixed in for good measure. When Isaac Watts was young, he thought the songs sung in church were done in such a dreary tone. And they were not easy to sing. He thought they were monotonous and surely did not reflect the depth of faith and gratitude that people actually felt. His father, tired of hearing his son complain, said, 'Why don't you write better hymns?' And so he did. There have been different tunes, but 100 years after it was written, Lowell Mason set the lyrics that Isaac Watts wrote to the tune that we sing today. Musically, some believe we can hear strains of Handel's Messiah, and perhaps that is so, or it could be a chance resemblance. As with many hymns, sometimes there are changes to the lyrics or verses dropped. In the hymnal used by the Latter-day Saints, the refrain in the first verse of Joy to the World sings of saints and angels rather than heaven and nature. In our own gray hymnal, number 245, to reflect our Unitarian Universalist theology, a key word in the third verse was changed. In the original, it is far as the curse is found. We sing, if we sing from the book, as far as love is found. But we don't sing from the book because people in this church like to sing the old words. One last note. Among many Christians who have written about the history of this hymn, they note that it's actually not a celebration of the birth of Jesus, but of the second coming of the Christian Messiah. Yet it's become one of the most beloved carols sung at Christmas time, and rarely at any other. Perhaps that is because when we sing the lyric, "Let every heart prepare him room," we are made angels in Bethlehem 2 millennia ago, lullabying ever so insistently into the ear of the innkeeper with no vacancies, who eventually does make room. Now I'm going to tell you a story This is a story called Trouble at the Inn, written by Dina Donahue. For years now, whenever Christmas pageants are talked about in a certain little town in the Midwest, someone is sure to mention the name of Wallace Perling. Wally's performance in one annual production of the Nativity play has slipped into the realm of legend. But the old-timers who were in the audience that night never tire of recalling exactly what happened. Wally was 9 that year and in the 2nd grade, though he should have been in the 4th. Most people in town knew that he had difficulty keeping up. He was big and a little awkward, slow in movement and in mind. Still, Wally was well liked by the other children in his class, all of whom were smaller than he, though the boys had trouble hiding their irritation when Wally would ask to play ball with them. They'd find a way to keep him out, but Wally would hang around anyway, not sulking, just hoping. He was a helpful boy, always willing and smiling, and the protector, paradoxically, of the underdog. If the older boys chased the younger ones away, it would be Wally who'd say, "Can't they stay? They're no bother." Wally fancied the idea of being a shepherd in the Christmas pageant, but the play's director, Miss Lombard, assigned him a more important role. After all, she reasoned, the innkeeper did not have too many lines, and Wally's size would make his refusal of lodging to Joseph more forceful. And so it happened that the usual large partisan audience gathered for the town's yearly extravaganza of crooks and crushes, beards, crowns, halos, and a whole stage full of squeaky voices. No one on stage or off was more caught up in the magic of the night than Wallace Perling. They said later that he stood in the wings and watched the performance with such fascination that Miss Lombard had to make sure he didn't wander on stage before his cue. Then the time came when Joseph appeared, slowly, tenderly guiding Mary to the door of the inn. Joseph knocked hard on the wooden door set into the painted backdrop. Wally, the innkeeper, was there, waiting. "What do you want?" Wally said, swinging the door open with a brusque gesture. "We seek lodging." "Seek it elsewhere," Wally spoke vigorously. "The inn is filled." "Sir, we've asked everywhere in vain. We've traveled far and are weary." "There is no room in this inn for you." Wally looked properly stern. "Please, good innkeeper, this is my wife, Mary. She is heavy with child and needs a place to rest. Surely you must have some small corner for her. She is so tired." Now, for the first time, the innkeeper relaxed his stiff stance and looked down at Mary. With that, there was a long pause, long enough to make the audience a bit tense with embarrassment. "No, begone," the prompter whispered. "No," repeated Wally automatically, "begone." Joseph sadly placed his arm around Mary, and Mary laid her head upon her husband's shoulder, and the two of them started to move away. The innkeeper did not return inside his inn, however. Wally stood there in the doorway, watching the forlorn couple. His mouth was open, his brow creased with concern, his eyes filling unmistakably with tears, and suddenly this Christmas pageant became different from all the others. "Don't go, Joseph," Wally called out. "Bring Mary back." And Wallace Perling's face grew into a bright smile. "You can have my room." Some people in town thought that the pageant had been ruined. Yet that there were others, many, many others, who considered it the most Christmas of all Christmas pageants they had ever seen. And that's the end of the story. What do you need to clear away to make space for joy? Sometimes we get distracted and busy. The concerns of our day, our to-do list, our internal critic, drown out the sound of the voice inside us that knows how and where to grow joy. There's an easy fix. We just need to slow down and breathe. Come into the present moment. Be still. And ask ourselves the question, what brings me joy? That's it. What brings me joy? Sometimes the problems in the world pile up in us. They take up too much space, our feelings of despair and hopelessness can spill over into places in us where joy might otherwise take root. It can feel selfish or self-indulgent to pursue joy when there are children dying in detention centers at the border. It feels like there's no room in us for joy because we have to make space for being informed. We make space for awareness that Australia is burning. We hold our neighbors who are hungry and afraid and traumatized. And. We need to remember, though, that inviting joy into this crowded space is not selfish or self-indulgent, but an act of generosity and courage. What we do matters, but so does how we do it. Our work in the world for peace and justice feels brittle and is less effective when it's driven by anger or fear instead of love and joy. As I said earlier, in a culture that works hard to make us feel anxious, afraid, and unworthy of love, cultivating joy is an act of resistance. Sometimes, to find my way back to joy, I also need to clear away feelings of unworthiness. I get stuck in this place where I think I don't deserve joy, don't deserve love. I'm not good enough or successful enough or perfect enough. I withhold joy from myself and attempt to use it as a motivator. But delayed gratification doesn't work. Without joy, it's hard to find the determination to keep going. If this ever happens to you, I want you to remember what I've learned the hard way. Joy is our birthright. We don't have to do anything, be anybody other than our own imperfect selves. We don't have to earn joy. We just have to make a little space and let it in. Let every heart prepare him room. There are biological reasons for this. Singing lowers our cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone, and increases dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. I get geeky about the brain stuff, sorry. It's entirely likely that we as humans actually evolved to sing. Every culture in the world makes music, and every human being has the capacity to sing. If you were ever told otherwise, I'm very sorry, but it was a lie. Singing is powerful enough to be recommended as a remedy for depression. Stacey Horn writes, I found myself facing a big black hole of depression. My doctor recommended I try joining a choir. Desperation forced my hand. I joined the choir, and that first performance, instead of singing Christmas carols, we sang a piece of music that was 230 pages long, Handel's Messiah. It was magnificent. I was left vibrating with a wondrous sense of musical rapport. Since that performance, I haven't found the sorrow that couldn't be at least somewhat alleviated, or the joy that couldn't be made even greater by singing. Singing requires that we breathe deeply. It invites us to surrender to the moment and the magic. Music's able to touch those places in ourselves that words aren't quite adequate to describe. Feelings and memories get attached to melodies in ways we don't fully understand. This is why people with Alzheimer's disease respond to music therapy. Even when we lose our stories, our identity, we keep the songs. So think about your favorite holiday songs. Think about the memories they evoke and the feelings they engender. This is a prayer written by my colleague Lisa Doge. It's meant to be spoken over some familiar melodies that evoke the Christmas spirit. Let our songs employ. Divine mystery, whose human form and human face and lively justice-seeking human spirit we celebrate this night. Holy force we call by many names, and this night, Emmanuel, God with us. Come into our hearts. Come forth into our imagination. O come, Emmanuel. Move upon us. Nudge our heads upward. Draw our eyes skyward that we might remember awe. Stare into infinity. See by the blazing, twinkling star of belief. Notice all that can be seen when a light shines in the darkness. Gestures of love, acts of courage, tendrils of change, dawning understanding, steadfast resolve. And to the earth it gave great light. Dwell in our hearts, sowing love, watering love, gathering love, and sowing it again until we know ourselves to love and to be loved, even more until we know ourselves to be love. Enter our lungs that we might release held breath and whisper, shout, proclaim the love that is ours, that is us. Love forever, ceasing never. Call us to witness, witness to love and justice, peace and joy, whenever, wherever, however they arrive. Open our mouths that we might proclaim love and justice, peace and joy to those with waiting hearts, thirsty souls, and to those whose ears are closed, whose souls must be cracked open. Repeat the sounding joy as far as earth is found. Amen. This next reading is on Joy and Sorrow by Khalil Gibran. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the selfsame well from which your laughter rises and oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. So what is the relationship between sorrow and joy? And what is the difference between joy and happiness? If the poet is to be believed, and I think he is, sorrow and joy are two sides of the same coin. Joy makes room for an awareness of the transient, the impermanent, the fragile. We savor the moment knowing it will never come again in quite the same way. Joy blooms in the deep places in us, places carved by sorrow, loss, and difficulty. Buddhist writer Sam Cronin writes, joy is something much deeper than happiness. If happiness has to do with the quality of our external lives, how and what we are doing, then joy has more to do with the quality of our internal lives, what's happening in the deeper dimension of our consciousness. To give an easy example, happiness is the feeling we get when we buy a new car, and joy is the feeling we get when we're standing on the side of the road after having totaled that car, realizing there are more important things in life than new cars, and we're grateful not to have died in the accident. Joy is what comes when we feel that our lives are meaningful. That's about the simplest way I can put it, he concludes. The way it works, though, is that in order to experience joy, we need to allow ourselves to feel the sorrow. We can't bury it. We can't pretend it's not there. Now, what do I mean by this? I was raised to present a bright and shiny face to the world. Meanwhile, the challenges in my family and in my heart somehow felt shameful. Hard feelings weren't allowed, so I buried them. I've learned, and am still learning, that swallowing sorrow, pain, anger, fear, shame for the sake of maintaining appearances is deeply unkind to myself and to the people I am with. As we tell the truth about what it means to be human, that all of these things are part of it, it opens space for other people to share their struggles. Being open about our sorrow or our pain isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of generosity. Because life is hard sometimes, and one of the things that makes it bearable is knowing we are not alone. When we give ourselves permission to experience life in its fullness, good, bad, and indifferent, and to feel all of our feelings, even the ones that aren't pleasant, we maintain the health of our inner landscape. We do the work it takes to turn the yucky stuff into compost And when we do that, seeds of joy can take root and grow and bloom. When we don't, when we just try to bury it, that same landscape becomes blighted and dark. So, no more let sins and sorrows grow, nor thorns infect the ground. This next reading is by my friend and colleague, Lois Van Leer. I wanted to include it tonight in particular because Lois's beloved is at the edge between living and dying, and so she's been in my heart, both of them, both Lois and Lori, and I bring them to you as well. These are her words. Let us still the world for a moment. Let it be blanketed by a soft darkness that quiets. Let us be brought to our knees by innocence, by hope, by peace. In this night, let something be born in us that heals all brokenness, that does not bow down to hatred and fear, but rather meets them gently and offers them love. Let us choose all the gifts of life we are offered. Tonight is about the impossible, but no more so than any other impossibility that fills our days. So let us embrace a story, a myth, if for a moment. Let us be carried away in its arms, held tenderly, rocked, comforted. Let this night, these stories, transform our hearts that we may become joy, hope, love, peace, enfleshed, incarnate. The hay, the tired refugee parents, the angels, the rich foreigners with wildly inappropriate gifts, the slightly confused but finally obedient shepherds, and the baby at the center of it all, the baby whose life purpose was to literally turn the world on its head, to dismantle structures of power and dominance and replace them with communities of justice and compassion. The baby who was God in flesh, God's only begotten child, sent to earth to teach us this different way of being. It's a lot of responsibility for a little baby. Which is probably why we're still working on the whole dismantling project. So much love, so much hope focused on a tiny being. Now, imagine that baby is you. Put yourself at the center of the story, because you are also a vessel of love and hope. You also embody the divine. You also are worthy of that kind of love and adoration. Can you let it in? Can you let it fill you and heal all of the cracks that life has put in your poor, battered heart? If I say, I see you, I love you. Yes, you are unbearably beautiful. Can you let that truth settle into your bones? I'm currently working with a new spiritual director, and this is actually the homework that she gave me. I'm supposed to imagine myself in the manger to let the love and adoration in. It's very challenging for me. Personally, I loving other people is super easy, but that's no sweat. I can love anybody. Letting the love in, that's what brings me to my knees. But I'm doing it anyway, even though it scares me and makes me cry every time, because the more I let in this fierce and unconditional love, the more I learn to like who I am, the more I become true to who I'm meant to be in the world. So I'm giving you, for Christmas, this gift, my homework assignment. Because I believe with all my heart that what fuels personal and spiritual growth isn't discipline and determination and all those good books that we read, but the careful cultivation of feelings of awe, joy, and most especially love, directed first and foremost toward our own beings. It heals, it saves, and it transforms if we're willing to surrender to it. Oh, the wonders of this love. These closing words are also very, very old. These were written on Christmas Eve in 1513, so over 400 years ago, by Fra Giovanni. I am your friend, and my love for you goes deep. There is nothing I can give you which you have not, but there is much, very much, that while I cannot give it, you can take. No heaven can come to us unless our hearts find rest in today. Take heaven. No peace lies in the future which is not hidden in this present little instant. Take peace. The gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within our reach, is joy. There is radiance and glory in the darkness, could we but see. And to see, we have only to look. I beseech you to look. Life is so generous a giver, but we, judging its gifts by the covering, cast them away as ugly or heavy or hard. Remove the covering, and you will find beneath it a living splendor, woven of love by wisdom with power. Welcome it. Grasp it. Touch the angel's hand that brings it to you. Everything we call a trial, a sorrow, or a duty, believe me, that angel's hand is there, the gift is there, and the wonder of an overshadowing presence. Our joys, too, be not content with them as joys. They, too, conceal diviner gifts. Life is so full of meaning and purpose, so full of beauty beneath its covering, that you will find earth but cloaks your heaven. Courage, then, to claim it. That is all. But courage you have, and the knowledge that we are all pilgrims together, wending through unknown country, home. And so at this time I greet you, not quite as the world sends greetings, but with profound esteem, and with the prayer that for you now and forever, the day breaks and the shadows flee away.